Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Kingdom Hearts Final Mix. In the last part we continued on here in Agrabah and made our way to the Cave of Wonders, and now we're gonna go finish this world off. Like I mentioned last time, the Cave of Wonders itself is quite the labyrinth to find your way around in, especially because there's several sub-objectives we need to clear before we can actively even reach the end of the area itself. And in order to do that, we need to take advantage of this area's structure. As mentioned last part, this area has two floors, effectively. This heavily red area up top, where there's more Heartless, some boulder traps, and even some water cannons that can push you into the pits, is the top floor. And below any pit, as well as certain stairs you can find, is the bottom floor, which is a waterlogged cave system with minor waterfalls separating sections that's largely very blue. Our end goal destination is up here in the red, but in order to open the end goal destination, we need to find something to destroy down in the blue. And finding that right destination on our first playthrough especially can be weird. But honestly, just given the scale of this area, it's far from what I would call a labyrinth. I'd say it's more labyrinthine down on the bottom floors where the water is. Up here, it's a pretty straightforward line. But I distinctly remember a lot of my early playthroughs, I either frequently got lost here or I was having issues beating the Cave of Wonders mini-boss itself, so it's no wonder I kind of consider Agrabah one of my 5 major walls to this game as a kid. So at this point, I feel like I should probably talk about the details of this game's creation, because admittedly, a Disney and Final Fantasy crossover is a really weird concept that we're just kind of used to existing at this point. Also, future me, if I get any details wrong here, please issue corrections as need be. So if memory serves, and these memories are made up of several interviews I've read over the last, 15 years, this game started out entirely as a platformer that was sort of meant to be Square's answer to Super Mario 64, similarly to how Brave Fencer Musashi was kind of seen as an answer to Ocarina of Time. I recall it was that Hironobu Sakaguchi, the father of Final Fantasy himself, was involved in early discussions about the game, but him and some other elites thought it would be a tough sell given Mario's popularity within the platforming genre already as it was. Tetsuya Nomura, I believe, got involved very early on and actively volunteered to be a part of the project, whatever, and ended up becoming, and hey, that timed out because if memory serves, he also would have started working on this game not long after he would have wrapped his work for The Bouncer. The Disney angle happened by complete happenstance, though, as Disney and Square shared an office building in Japan at the time, and an executive for both ended up having a conversation in an elevator that really jump-started the process for what this game ended up becoming. After all, who better to potentially rival Mario's mascot powers than the Mario of cartoons, Michael Mouse? What's kind of funny, though, is that this game started as a platformer, as I just mentioned, and due to that, gameplay was more the focus than the narrative, but Sakaguchi actively recommended Nomura to put more of a story focus into the game, so it would fit more with the story-centric nature of things that Square was known for and still is. Which I find funny for a couple reasons. One, people usually look at anything silly or just kind of weird in a Square game and just yell Nomura's name up to the skies, when really, based on that, they should probably be yelling Sakaguchi, especially given most of the Final Fantasy stuff was also him, prior to the PlayStation 1 era. What I do find interesting, though, is that you can really feel the way that this game started out as a platformer, as the way levels are laid out in Kingdom Hearts 1 is radically different than any of the games to follow. You can see it a bit in most worlds, but Wonderland, Deep Jungle, Agrabah here, and the penultimate world in the game's plot really showcase themselves as platforming levels with action RPG enemy encounters in them rather than any of the alternatives that the sequels would become. I always flinch whenever I come up to this jump to get this elixir, by the way, but it's actually a very easy jump to make, especially if you do the little delay you can do with the Keyblade swing. But no matter what, before you end up coming down to the blue underwater sections, go around the top layer and push the block I pushed down a few moments ago, as that will now land down here and allow you to access a certain item later on that you don't exactly need, but you might as well grab while you're here. So, last time I believe we ended up recruiting Aladdin into our party to help save Princess Jasmine. And I didn't talk about what his abilities were and what his stats are like. That's because, no matter what, you're going to need to use him here, as there's certain puzzle elements you need to do in order to progress that require him to be in your active party, rather than Donald or Goofy, whichever one you choose. The best way I could describe Aladdin, surprisingly, isn't as a rogue or a thief type class. He's closer to what I would usually describe as a fighter in Final Fantasy terminology, as his attacks are pretty much entirely based on physical damage. He'll either just do normal strikes with the scimitar, or use 2 specific special abilities that use up his MP, which I'll probably list the actual powers of on screen at the moment. But he can burn through his MP really quickly because of how aggressive he'll usually like to be with them. He does also notably have some party-wide support abilities that we've already seen several of in the LP up to this point, like Lucky Strike, Jackpot, etc. Largely, I like him, but I tend to like him less in combat than, say, Tarzan, especially for the point in the game I'm usually at this point level-wise, especially on Proud mode. In that regard, I know some people don't exactly gel with the world-exclusive party members deal, and I get it. Some of these characters would definitely be really helpful to have in other worlds or situations, but I doubt A, Disney wanted it to happen at all to begin with, and B, that would probably honestly lead to later worlds especially needing like 3 to 6 variants of any given cutscene depending on the party members you could bring in, and that would just be a nightmare to make, especially for this game's relatively small scale compared to even other projects that were happening at the time with Square. It never really bothered me though, but I think that's because by the time I first played even Kingdom Hearts 2, because that's where I started, I had played enough RPGs to kind of get used to the whole some party members only join you for specific plot sections type deal. Hell, as I've covered several times across my LPs, my favorite RPG ever is Final Fantasy IV. A game that is very famous for drastically and forcefully changing your party setup several times across that plot. An average playthrough of Final Fantasy IV for me is about 12 hours. There's like 9, 10, 11, 12 party shifts throughout that entire game. I got really used to games doing that due to stuff like that. So welcome to Agrabah's treasure room. We're actively not too far from the boss fight right now. In fact, it's technically through the door on the far side of this room. But the door is currently blockaded by a pillar. The reason you need to do stuff in the blue underground section of the Cave of Wonders is you need to find the bottom of that pillar and knock it down to be able to access the boss fight. On top of just the various treasure chests you can get around the various areas up here and down there. Worth noting though, I don't show it off for a little bit there. The treasure room itself is actually where some white mushrooms can spawn in. The white mushrooms there actively do the pose you need to use gravity on. So if you want to potentially get the gravity arts now for the quest that involves getting all of these spell-based arts, you might want to exit and re-enter the treasure room until they show up specifically. So we've brought in good old Aladdin because I need him in order to actively progress down here at all. Kingdom Hearts 1 does this every now and then where they force you to use the world-exclusive party member. Kingdom Hearts 2 Beyond doesn't really do it that much, if ever, or if they do it the way Kingdom Hearts 3 does it, which is a lot more freeing with things to begin with. And the precise reason we need Aladdin is that having him in our party allows us to actually interact with these statues that have the red gemstones on them, which if you've seen the movie, you know that means it's time for good old Abu to come into play here. Also, the Thunder Ring there just reduces thunder damage you intake by 20%. Abu's purpose down here is to investigate those statues which will open up passageways. Some are required, some are just for items, it really depends on the one. Speaking of which, that mithril there can only be grabbed for the moment by dropping that block down here that I did earlier this very video. You don't need the block, keeping in mind later game movement upgrades, but if you want to get it now, that's what you have to do. Here's something that I really didn't try for a playthrough or two growing up. You can actively just climb waterfalls in the underground segment here to get to higher areas. I get why young me just didn't really attempt that for several playthroughs, because most of the rest of the time in water, Sora can't climb anything that's not directly at the water's surface. And I guess I just figured waterfalls would be a one-way passageway due to that. But no, it's two-way. And hey, that really helps you find some extra items along the way, not for nothing. Now, the next statue I'm taking Abu to investigate is completely optional. All it does is open a door that leads to some items. With that said, this is more me taking care of step 1 to do step 2 quite a bit later, as the door it opens is actually up at that little cliff you can see in the far distance there, and we don't have a high enough jump to access that yet. But while I'm doing all the statues anyway, I figured I might as well get this door open now so I don't need to go out of the way to put Aladdin back in my party later and open it then. Our actual destination is pretty close to this door, though, as it's through that cave you can just barely see off to the side there. Admittedly, it's kind of hard to see with how dark this area is. Worth noting, basically every single area of the blue area has a staircase that leads up to one of the red area rooms. And it really just depends on where you're going, what order, what you want to get done there. This here is the bottom of the column that's blocking the way over in the treasure room, and we need to go over and swing at it. There we go, and now we have access to what's beyond the treasure room.
My first wish, genie, show me the keyhole.
Damn, Jafar asking to show hole? Damn, Jafar asking to show hole?
My first wish, genie, show me the keyhole.
Damn, Jafar asking to show hole? 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 And with that, the way to the boss fight is now open, so we're just going to do a quick little bit of speed up to get back to the treasure room and move on from there. With that said, we're actually going to go back to normal speed once we're actually in the treasure room, as our next use of a boo is in, though. There's a little pedestal he can interact with that'll blow you up towards the final remaining treasure chest in here. Worth noting, though, this is the final of the statues Abu can interact with, so after I grab the chest this one leads me to, which I think contains a Thundagaji, I'm actively taking Aladdin back out of my party and putting Donald back in, as I'd rather have the extra magic for the upcoming boss fights rather than any of the damage Aladdin could do. Though, honestly, if you're playing on Proud Mode, I'd recommend actively bringing the party of Donald and Aladdin into this fight rather than Donald and Goofy.
That boy again?
He is more persistent than I expected. Why not explain the situation to that boy, Riku? Doing so may actually prove useful to our...
Wait a second. Are you Maleficent?
Jafar, let Jasmine go!
Not a chance. You see, she's a princess. One of 7 who somehow hold the key to opening the door.
Open?
But you fools won't live to see what lies beyond it. Genie, my second wish, crush them!
Genie, no!
Sorry, Al. The one with the lamp calls the shots. I don't have a choice.
Time for the shared boss against Jafar and the Genie. Let's start by talking about the Genie's attacks. Genie will slowly hone in on your location, doing one of 3 attacks, either a lariat around in a circle, a whip with his lower tail, or just outright punching you. He's pretty slow, but not for nothing. He can still pretty easily catch up to you and blindside you if you're focusing too much on Jafar, especially as you try to track him as he moves around the arena like this. Worth noting, though, if any of his attacks actively miss, they do drop MP or HP restoratives in a lot of cases, which can be pretty helpful. Jafar, though, is a mage who focuses largely on long-distance combat. His only melee attacks are lighting his staff on fire and doing either a vertical or horizontal slice with it. When he's not teleporting around or floating around the arena to one of the various platforms, he's either using his own Thundara attack that shoots a beam of electric damage directly at you, like so, or casting Blizzaga, where he freezes the water in the center of the room and creates a tornado from it. With that said, dodging the latter is very easy, as it only affects the center of the arena, while the former can be dodged either by moving constantly perpendicularly to him or hiding behind a platform. With that said, I tend to get hit by it in very stupid ways most of the time I play this fight. I think he also has a shockwave attack where he slams his staff into the floor, but I seldom see it, and even then it's probably not that big of an issue. Jafar also notably has a defensive spell, effectively Shell right out of certain Final Fantasies. I think it's if you use enough magic damage on him in a certain time frame, he'll put it up to absorb magical hits for a little bit, but I believe it wears off with enough time, and on top of that, I think you can also overload it with enough damage on top of that. The real difficulty in this fight on any difficulty isn't actively dodging either of the participants' attacks, though not for nothing again, on Proud Mode, get this, they really hurt. It's being able to damage Jafar at all, as he gets really teleport and movement happy in some runs of this fight. In character for him, admittedly, but definitely annoying, as there's times where it just feels like you're chasing him more often than actively fighting him. Not for nothing, he's not the only fight in this game, let alone the series, that's guilty of that, but out of all of the fights that have an issue like this, I feel like Jafar is probably the most annoying, if only because of his movement speed on top of the size of the arena. Also not helping things is that in pretty much every game after Kingdom Hearts 1, Sora usually has a much faster method of movement to get to bosses across an arena much more quickly, especially in Kingdom Hearts 2 and 3. So this ends up just feeling kind of worse in retrospect on top of that. This is probably also the first fight where the bosses are real chatterboxes when they use certain moves as an audio tell, and if you die a lot on a fight like this, those lines really get burned into your ears. Kingdom Hearts 2 especially has several famous instances of exactly that. And I'll get to those whenever I get to Kingdom Hearts 2 in like, maybe like half a decade, I would assume, depending on how many RPGs I have on my docket coming up. This is definitely the last RPG I'm doing of this scale for a little bit, though, because between Omega Ruby, Alpha Sapphire last year and this year, I need some shorter games for a good little bit before I go back to another larger RPG, getting a little ahead of myself there. I didn't do it too often in this fight just because of Jafar's magic barrier, but not for nothing, gravity is probably the best spell to use in this fight, as you can hit him from pretty much any angle using that. Meanwhile, fire and ice, you gotta have specific ranges or altitudes in mind to be able to hit him reliably. But again, physical attacks are more than likely gonna be your best bet. He's not a very hard fight, but he's definitely very annoying depending on how he feels about movement and all that, especially when he moves around the arena in a complete circle when he has 1 HP left. I mean, just come on, man. Thank you. For beating that duo, we get another Power of Ice, upgrading our Blizzard spell to Blizzara. Spell upgrades are entirely based on completing certain objectives, be they main plot or side quests. Blizzara doesn't cost more MP, but the ice bolts are larger, shoot out in a wider spread, and do more damage on top of that. With that said, now that's done, let's go rescue Jasmine and get our way out of this world, why don't we?
Genie, my final wish. I want you to make me an all-powerful genie!
Yeah, we're not done yet. We got one more bout against Jafar to do here. The lamp! Get Jafar's lamp! And our final fight against Genie Jafar is finally arrived. In this fight, your target isn't the genie itself, though, it's his lamp that Iago is carrying. With that said, of course, Jafar's not going to make it easy. He's going to be attacking you all the while. On top of that, Iago's going to be flying all over the place in this arena, though he does take rests at certain points because he gets tired, leaving him very open for attack. Jafar in this phase might be larger, but he's actively a much easier fight than he was as just a standard sorcerer. He can do a 1-2 combo of punches if he's directly next to you, but he can also decide to just cover either fist and fire and do a left or right hook on top of that does fire elemental damage. He can use a thunder damage based I-beam attack similar to the one he fired from his staff in the prior phase, but in most cases he's going to use his most common attack, which is making a giant lava rock out of the lava below him and throwing it at you. With that said, if a platform is in any way in front of you, that's going to get blocked by the platform, and thus it's also a very ineffective attack. He can also apparently attempt to cast Cure on Iago from my research, but since the HP gauge we're hitting is the barrier on the lamp, it doesn't actively heal the HP bar we're reducing here. If anything, it probably just helps Iago get his energy back to fly around the arena some more. Jafar clearly did not think this through very well, as he's lost pretty much all of his movement. He can only exist on top of the lava around the arena, making his melee attacks pitifully easy to dodge by just being on the opposite side of a section of the arena. He can still blindside you, not for nothing, and if he does hit you, he does do a good chunk of damage, but having even just arrow up makes this fight a complete joke compared to the Sorcerer Jafar fight. There are versions of this fight that can be annoying, but that's more relegated to a certain Game Boy Advance game I'll talk about at a later date. Let's get this done with.
Okay, Jafar. Back to your lamp.
Defeating Jafar again gives us a fire upgrade, so now Sora can use Fyra. It's stronger than fire, and I think can home in better. It's a less notable upgrade than Blizzara in that regard. We also got our first Ansem report, but we'll read that in the next part or so.
Jasmine? Jasmine! Whoa, we better get out of here! Jasmine!
You'd be mad to think they were going to do some version of the Cave of Wonders escape in this game. With that said, if you're traumatized by the Super Nintendo or Genesis games, fear not. The Cave of Wonders escape here is honestly more of a set piece than anything. It's actively very easy. I don't think I've ever died here, and if I have, it was probably only on a playthrough of Proud Mode I did years ago. They have plenty of health pickups along the way, and the only things that can actively damage you, I think, are the set pieces that are actively falling on the ground. As you can see, I'm running into several of these stalagmites there and taking 0 damage at all. I've never tried to do this myself just out of fear, but I imagine depending on your level or the difficulty you're playing on, it's probably entirely possible to clear this segment by doing absolutely nothing and letting the game move on its own, as whatever damage you take might be offset by the health orbs placed along the center pathway that you're on by default. So Jasmine's no longer in Agrabah. Sora, let's go find her. Sorry, I can't take you with me. Why not? I sure wish we could. But we can't. If we take him to another world, we would be... meddling! Aladdin, we'll find Jasmine. I promise.
Earth to Al? Hello, you still have one wish left. Look, just say the word. Ask me to find Jasmine for you.
I wish for your freedom, Genie.
Al!
A deal's a deal, Genie. Now you can go anywhere you want. You're your own master. But if you can, it'd be great if you could go along with them and help Sora find Jasmine.
Sorry, Al. I'm done taking orders from others. But a favor? Now that's entirely different. I guess I could give that a try. After all, we're pals, right, Al?
Genie.
Just leave it to me!
But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 16, we're going to say goodbye to Agrabah and move on to our next world. See you guys then.